Hey, what's up, everybody? BDO44 coming at you with another video. All right, so my mind is taking me down a rabbit hole because earlier today, while I was doing a little art, it dawned on me something. The Boston Celtics have a bit of a logjam at point guard, and all three of those players have contracts on multiple years at mid-tier money. It's really interesting to me because that's more or less 56, $57 million wrapped up in three players that play the same position, which is not a bad thing at all. At all. But they don't necessarily have the minutes to justify it when you consider that Peyton Pritchard is also back there who needs minutes as well. So what you have is Malcolm Brogdon on board with multiple years, Marcus Smart on board with multiple years, Peyton Pritchard, a young player ready to step forward, and of course, Derek White is sitting there in the mix at multiple years as well. So the thing about the Boston Celtics, though, is you're going to be relying heavily upon those guards because they don't have a whole lot of depth outside of that on the wing. You know, they got Grant Williams, they got, Time Lord, they got obviously Tatum, Brown, but, Horford as well. But when you're looking at what they're doing in regards to the rest of the team, you really are relying upon those guards, which is why, in my mind, you probably wouldn't hurt to take one of those guys and try to turn them into maybe two guys that play different positions, maybe two more wings. Now, granted, it's going to be hard to find good wings out there. It's going to be tough, but that would be something I would try to just kick the can on, maybe, if it makes sense to the team, depending on what their vision is for their squad. Obviously, you just went to the finals, so you don't think anything's broken. But Time Lord and his knee is always a concern for me, so I would like to get a little more insurance for him. Al Horford, he's coming off a fantastic year. How many more fantastic years am I expecting Al Horford to give me? This is not a young player, so are we prepared for him to fall off a cliff at any moment if I'm the Boston Celtics? That would be the thing. You don't want a situation where those two things go wrong at the same time. Al Horford takes steps back with Father Time, and Time Lord has issues with the knee, and then suddenly you don't have enough size to make your team good enough to compete with the Cleveland Cavaliers and all those other squads, despite having so much talent defensively around them. So it's one of those situations where it's like the Boston Celtics have plenty, but I look at their guard situation and I say, you don't have the minutes to justify all three of those guys. You don't, not in my mind. You don't have the minutes. Derek White's minutes are going to be a little less than what they should be for the price tag that he has. So it's one of those situations where his contract, the thing about it is, when I tried to mess around with the trade tracker and try to figure out where he fits, I couldn't find nowhere, honestly. Now, I didn't try everything, but I looked for teams that could use his piece, maybe a point guard, maybe a microwave scorer off the bench who can do some combo things, maybe a shooting guard who they need in rotation to maybe play point guard as well. The teams that have that type of need don't necessarily have a good, easy way to match the money without giving up stuff that they have no business giving up. What you find around the league right now is a lot of teams have found discount players, high-level players at $1 million, high-level players at $2 million, guys on rookie contracts that you know are going to play well. So it's one of those situations where it's like when you try to move a guy like Derek White, now in trying to get multiple pieces in turn for him, you're trying to incorporate some of those pieces, and that's not happening. None of those GMs are going to be able to give you those pieces. So then you're incorporating trying to give up picks and things of that nature, as to which I have not worked into my equation in regards to the Boston Celtics. I don't know what their pick situation is, or whether it be necessary for them to do something like that just to move a player who is really good. You know what I mean? Derek White's good. But, it's a situation where it's like, okay, they have a bit of a logjam, but I don't necessarily see an easy way to fix that problem at all. And it ain't really that big of a problem, so you just live with it. It's not like Sacramento last year where they had these three young guards and they got to figure out which one they got to pay because one of them's making max money and all that. It's not that situation. All three of these guys are making comparable amounts of money. All three of them are going to be on tab for multiple years. So you don't have to rush to trade any of them. But the goal should be try to figure out if you could do something with that trio so that Peyton Pritchard can step up, because he is one of those guys at like a rookie contract that you expect to play higher in his ability. So in my mind, you don't trade Peyton for that reason alone. You much rather trade one of those 3 contracts. So that's how I look at it. You know, maybe you do move on from Peyton since you don't necessarily have his money in the future. That might make more sense, to be honest with you. Given the fact that you do have those guys on for multiple years, they are in a range of age where you feel comfortable about all 3 of them. It's not like this is a real problem per se. It's just that I see the Boston Celtics having other needs, and so on and so forth. But again, it's not a rush I wouldn't necessarily say, okay, they need to make these moves right now. No, they don't have to do that. They can do that at any point in time in the future. This is not pressing by any stretch of the imagination in my mind. But it is something to keep an eye on, to be honest with you. Just for over the next year or 2. I don't even think this has to necessarily be addressed this season, depending on how the team shakes out. If they get off to a winning start, continue to have a winning season, Derek White might just fall into a 6-man role and be comfortable with that. Marcus Smart has had his injury issues. Obviously, Malcolm Brogdon has had his injury issues. So when you're considering what the Boston Celtics have, of course, insurance makes sense for that, no different than insurance makes sense for that center position. So I understand that. But when I look at those 3 contracts, I say, do I really want each of them at that amount just to give them insurance for one another? You know what I mean? That's just how I'm assessing it. I don't know if that necessarily makes sense to me when Peyton Pritchard's back there at a rookie contract. See what I'm saying? No Peyton Pritchard, maybe a different story. But with him back there, and you got, of course, Jaylen Brown eating up a bunch of minutes at shooting guard, it's really tough to try to find proper minutes for those guards without somebody going down or some injury or some sort. So, yeah, that Boston Celtics roster can be tweaked a little bit. I do love the acquisition of Malcolm Brogdon because he came in dirt cheap. So that's not a problem by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, you love the Defensive Player of the Year, Marcus Smart, so you have no interest in moving him. But Derek White's a guy who is a high-level player, but you're going to have to give him more minutes to get the most out of him. We saw it in the finals and the playoffs last year. He had good spurts in the playoffs, but he also had bad spurts in the playoffs, and I think it had to do with the role that he was in and what he was asked to do in the role that he's going to be asked to play this year, which may be even more so of a sacrifice for him because of the presence of Malcolm Brogdon, who, if healthy, is basically an all-star. So, yeah, Derek White is a guy who's going to need to get out from underneath that logjam. And this is why expansion is so important, man. I'm telling you, we talk about NBA expansion, but that specific situation is one of several examples where you see just an overload and no real solution of one particular position, right? You've seen it also in other situations as well that come to mind. So, you know, you just look at Orlando, for example. Markelle Fultz coming back healthy. We talk about Jalen Suggs, who's also coming back from injury. And then you look at Cole Anthony, who I could argue is ready to break out. He doesn't need that much insurance around him. He needs less so he can show what he can do, in my opinion. So it's one of those situations where you take a guard from Orlando, you take a guard from Boston, you put them in the Las Vegas team. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's how this has to work, so that you can have more of a parity across the league where it's not such an overload. You know, I look at Indiana and I say, wow, they got a bunch of centers and forwards, like dudes that you know for a fact need an opportunity at 30 minutes plus when they fully develop. It's like 4 or 5 of them in Indiana right now. And then you got, of course, Turner on top of them looking to get paid. So it's like, it's a lot of stuff like that. Would be like, man, if there were just 2 more teams in the league, easy going. Stuff would smooth out. You would see players go into situations where it would be more minutes for them to show you that they can too be all-stars, just like some of the guys who are in better situations, man. I'm curious about just the sacrifice of certain players. Like, I'm looking at Atlanta, I'm like, the sacrifice that those players are gonna have to make in that backcourt. You know, it's gonna be interesting to see Trae Young and DeJounte Murray try to figure that out. To a lesser degree, I think some may say the same about Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, even though I think they fit a bit better, especially with those two centers in the mix. You know, it's just a lot of stuff around the league that I'm looking at and I'm saying, you know, it's not necessarily a problem where you see long jams, but it's just like, yeah, you can totally see where guys are going to have to make adjustments to their game. I look at Jaden Ivey in Detroit. He's a guy who probably is going to be great with the ball in his hands, but he's never going to be the primary ball handler with Cade Cunningham on the team. That's never going to happen. Like, I just think about what would happen if Ja Morant were drafted into a situation where he had to play with Chris Paul or something like that. Yeah, he would be great, but would he be the Ja that we know today? Nah, he would be some shooting guard, you know, playing off the ball. So it's like, these are the type of things I think about. When players get drafted in certain situations, it's like, all right, they're going to have to adjust. Like, it's going to have to be a thing where they're going to have to figure it out. Detroit, same team. Look at all those centers they got. They got, you know, Duren, Stewart, Garza. Who else? It's another guy, Olynyk. They got a lot of bigs, man. So it's one of those situations where it's like, okay, take a couple of those, send them to Vegas. See? Smooth things out. Everybody gets their 30 minutes. Everybody gets their $100 million contracts. So that's really what it's all about, man. Really what it's all about. Atlanta, another situation. Onyeka Okongwu. You know, as I was telling you guys earlier in a different video, I've been drafting basketball teams on Yahoo all day. Yeah, Onyeka Okongwu has a pretty high ADP for what I expect. Not because I don't think he's a good player. He's an excellent player. He's one of those guys who's going to need his 30 minutes and ain't going to get it. Why? Because Collins. Because I think it's a guy by the name of Johnson on the back that they drafted last year. I believe his name is Johnson. Excellent power forward. JJ of some sort. You got Hunter in the mix. You got Capella in the mix. It's like, when is Onyeka Okongwu going to actually get a chance to show that he's that type of power forward when he's got all these different forwards to deal with? You know? Like, at one point, does he get the 30-plus minutes to show he is that guy, that double-double threat? You know what I mean? It's just, sure, he's going to have his nights, but the consistency, I don't know if he'll find it in that role. I don't know if he will. Send him to Vegas, boom. Get the point? That is why we're lobbying so much for expansion. Get Seattle their squad back. We can take players from each team that has these logjam situations and better those teams by removing those players and putting them in that third team, or in that expansion team rather. I mean, you just simply will see addition by subtraction in certain situations. Now that does hurt depth. Best believe it's going to hurt depth. We're going to see some situations where you will see roster spots mismanaged once that takes place. I think you're going to start seeing guys who maybe shouldn't have roster spots get roster spots, because a lot of times you just see that sort of stuff when the league is a bit more balanced. But I do think that with the advent of the G League and all this other stuff, other avenues from which players come from, I think there's a good chance that even that may saturate with more talent. You will see guys come from those situations and then get the minutes that are otherwise not given to them, and they'll turn into the players that we think they can turn into as well. So that's why expansion is important. You might mess around and find out you need 34 teams rather than just 32. So don't be surprised by that, especially the way international basketball is going. You're going to find more and more gyms in different countries. Please believe that. That's just inevitable, man. You think Jokic and Doncic are last to come? Please. They're just getting started. So, yeah, I'm excited about where everything's going with the NBA. I've been, like I said, drafting these teams all day is just giving me a different look and more to talk about. You know, a lot more to talk about, and that's ultimately what we want in the NBA. So, with the season around the corner, hopefully we'll have more content for you very soon. And my name is BDO44. I thank you all for watching. I'm out.